I figure what we do today is just give you a taste of why Brazil has been working in IT outsourcing. It's a large country. It's 65% of the Latin American economy, 200 million inhabitants. It is the world's 7th largest economy. It's the 8th largest IT market in the world in its own right. 1.7 million IT professionals work in the IT services industry. In the last ranking that was done of the top 500 universities in the world, 6 of them were Brazilian compared to 2 from India. It graduates 100,000 IT professionals that enter the workforce every year. Plus, it has a very well-developed IT infrastructure. You know, when you visit a company in Brazil and they show you their facilities, they don't show you the diesel generators first. You know, it's not necessary. They're there, but there's not this concern that you won't have 2 different sources of power, you don't have 2 different feeds of telco, you don't have enough fiber to transport your information. The infrastructure is there, and it's solid. When you put that together with the people, you create an IT services industry that is mature, that is robust, that is large. Why hasn't it been more prominent in the offshoring business? Because when you have an economy where the IT business is growing between 12 and 17% for the last 20 years, you have a lot of local business. There's hundreds of IT firms in Brazil. You do have all the major ones, but there hadn't been really enough Brazilian organizations of the size and the magnitude that would allow them to credibly serve global companies outside of Brazil. And that was what started to change about 5 years ago with some entrepreneurs that saw the potential and started creating some enterprises in Brazil or consolidating others. The large players were there. IBM Global Services, Accenture, EDS, HP, now one company, Unisys, they're all there with large infrastructure services units, large applications development units. But the Brazilian companies themselves tended to be smaller, undercapitalized. Now, we've heard this all along. The culture in Brazil, like in the rest of LATAM, is very similar to the American business environment. Now, Brazil in particular, being a federated nation like the United States, a country with 200 years of continuous, basically capitalistic democracies, or sometimes dictatorial regimes for short periods of time, but that were capitalistic too. There was never a change in the economic model. IBM started in 1896 in Brazil. Has created a very large basis for business with a lot of training for executives. And that's why you see so many Brazilian executives today leading either Brazilian or other global corporations around the world. So that fiber has been there forever, which is very different from a communist China or a socialist India, which is transform itself miraculously and magnificently, but you only have one real full generation of that new group. Now, the comprehensive cost of outsourcing is actually attractive. The rates are much higher than India, 30%, 35%, 40%, depends on what you're looking at. But when you look at the full cost of outsourcing, including travel back and forth, including the percentage of resources you can have in Brazil. In the case of CPM Braxis, 99% of our offshore projects, 99% of the people are actually in Brazil, 1% in the US. And it's very simple. You can be talking to somebody at 6 p.m., and if you decide that that person should come to a meeting next day at 9 a.m. in your office, he'll be there. Because there's plenty of flights overnight. There is a lower cost on average because of your mix of resources and because of the cost of management, plus the productivity is higher. The zones, we talked about nearshore's advantage being really not where the shore is. Basically, do we have a time zone that allows us not to talk to the night shift all the time? services associated with infrastructure is an area in which time zone makes a difference, because what is it about? It's about monitoring, about enabling processes remotely. So what can happen? Well, things can go wrong. Something can be detected that is failing. You need to act. You really don't want the night shift when there's a problem. Everybody gets on the phone. There's processes that need to be implemented, things that need to be resolved. So that ability to have a highly charged conversation with people who get it and who are culturally attuned to what you're saying, and that willingness to share the problem before it happens, whoever sees it first, shares it, makes a big difference. And that's reinforced in the whole process of training. I'll give you a couple of examples of what we mean by the kind of work that is being done in Brazil today. This example of is a company that it's a financial services company, one of the largest companies that support hedge funds around the world. They are the back office to the hedge funds. The desktops, the processing, the clearing, the settlement. They have 4 data centers around the world, from Geneva to Ireland to the United States to the Caribbean. And the process here was to do the remote infrastructure management of their core infrastructure elements around the world. The beauty of this work is that it is not built by number of people. The beauty of this work is that it was based on a diagnostic that identified a level of service and a level of service improvements that could be done at this client. So going in, there was a diagnostic of 2 weeks that produced a report with returns on investments, with improvements by applying correctly ITIL rules, ISO 20000 standards. And from that report, the client then decided whether they wanted to engage with us or not to accomplish those results. There were almost $4 million projected over 3 years just from starting, and 40% on recurring costs. So including the changes, there was some significant savings going in. What happened is that on top of delivering on those services, there's a group of kids that are basically process engineers or statisticians that are working continuously with the data from the monitoring of these 100,000 different things that are being supported. And they produce analysis of what is the cause and effect of incidents and what things could be done to reduce those effects. Mundane things. Sometimes it is, they notice, for example, that certain protocol triggers a call that calls 9 people at a client. But they've noticed that 95% of the time, from those 9 people that are called in, there's only 2 people that own the problem, that actually need to resolve it. So they made the recommendation that they should really only call those 2, because the problem resolution would be faster. They don't need to educate the other 7. They can just recognize the problem and resolve it. And if it is the 5% situation, then you can still call the other 5. That's like super simplistic. It cut 30 minutes out of problem resolution average. Others are more technical. Particular servers that need to be moved or upgraded, network processes that are having certain congestion problems at the same time as other capacity problems are occurring in the network, and solutions to those things. So that continuous improvement process benefits both the client and the provider. So that's how these things work. Another example that's interesting, I thought we talked a lot about cloud here. This is a very interesting, to me, it was a fascinating project. I had no idea you could actually do this. This is, again, an online brokerage firm, large online brokerage firm in the United States, has millions of customers. They developed a community of developers. And this community of developers is all over the world. They have 800 of these really cracked developers all over the world. And they developed a cloud, a private cloud, just to support development efforts for the bank through these developers. And what we did together is we created the infrastructure management processes to be able to habilitate virtual computers for each of these developers. So a developer joins, he gets a particular workload that he needs to work on. There's a definition of what kind of computer he needs. What space, what software, what storage, what processing power, and all that gets allocated remotely from Sao Paulo. But then it also gets monitored as it's being used or not. And things are fixed, improved, reported. So it allows this community of developers to actually be operating at a very high level of efficiency, consuming exactly the computer they need, reconfiguring when they need to, but also a lot of monitoring on what exactly are they really doing. It's a big area for us, growing fast, this whole concept of managing and enabling private clouds. At the end of the day, that's what Nearshore is about. It's the people that do make the difference. You put on top of that enough scale, enough structure, enough process, enough technology, all of which we learned really from the Indian experience. And you have a superior product to offer to the market. Nearshore, it's about its people. And that's the message I wanted to leave you with. Thank you.